And our realtors sure know when to show up on time, don't they?
Yeah, that's all right. It's understandable. It's, it's summer months and there's a lot going on, and it's just uh it's just what it is. The market is not friendly, and so it creates a lot of issues.
Right. Well, you're ready to go whenever you are.
Okay,
Let's see.
basically today people are wondering why are we talking about counteroffers? Uh, because you've received training from Fresno and they talked about the counteroffer form themselves. And that's great. I'm glad that if you attended it, that would have been a great event. What we're going to be talking about today is not the form. What we're going to be talking about is when to do counteroffers and understanding when to use counteroffers. So, why are we doing this? Is because 3 years ago, basically, did you do counteroffers? No, we received 10, 15 offers, sometimes even more, and we just picked the best offer and had the client sign off on it, and we had an acceptance. Everybody went to the bank within sometimes 14 days or 30 days and 10 days in other situations. So the counteroffer never really come into play. We never really saw too much of it there for almost 2 years. So the market is changing now, and unfortunately, the price points are going the other direction. So during that 2 year period when the interest rates were only 3%, the house value went up. And prior to that, the interest rate was just setting in the 5% range, 5.5%. Pretty traditional market, nothing really unusual going on. Then we got into that 3% market when the government was starting to hand out money. Well, what's happened is we got some artificially inflated priced homes. And so now the market is up at such a point where it still has the appraisals are still sitting there. And then we have all the technology that's come into play. Some of that technology is AI. And AI wants to, every time we start writing something on a piece of paper, it wants to take over and tell us how to write the phrase or whatever it might be. And then we also have in the arena, we have analytics. Analytics are tied to setting values, determining values of properties. And so there's websites all over the internet. C21's got them, everybody's got them, and they want to determine what the value of a property is. And customers are, historically going to those to try to get a feel for the valuation. So there's a lot of changes that we had not really had a lot of prior to, 2019, 2020, and now we've got a market that's going the other direction. We had an up market for many years. It went to about 14 years where valuations continued to rise. So the skill level for countering and understanding how to counter offer and how to work with your clients, some of that skill went away in the last 2 or 3 years. So now it's starting to come back. And when the reason behind that is that the buyer uh, wants to reduce the price, the seller wants to maintain the price, but the seller doesn't have a good understanding of the interest rate issues and how they're impacting the buyer's ability to purchase. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we need to do as a real estate agent, because that's our role. Our role is to provide guidance to the customer. And in providing that guidance to the customer, we have to have a very good understanding of how the process works. And in many occasions, as we move forward in the next few months or even the next few years, counteroffers are going to be in play much more often than what they were in the past. So I'm going to give a little bit overlay of the current market conditions. If you pulled up data from the MLS, and I did put a worksheet in for this, your market right now currently is over 3 months of inventory. There was a point when most cities had less than 30 days of it, I mean, less than 30 properties for sale, and everybody was fighting for those properties. If I say as an example, we're over 3 months. In most every other areas over 3 months. Somebody says, well, it's a buyer's market when it gets 6 months. Well, I don't know how true that might be. I think the buyer's market is going to be coming much quicker than 6 months down the road when you start looking at inventory. But here's what we're dealing with. And this is what we're dealing with in the current market and why counteroffers are going to be more in play. Buyers have more options, new construction, concessions, and upgrades. Now, what did we learn from the sales meeting yesterday is that Michael was talking to one of the builders, and of course he was a prior manager with our company, and they were having lunch, and they're starting to see their inventory starting to rise, and so now they're starting to provide much more in the form of concessions and upgrades and reducing price to move that product through, because these companies are what? They're all on the stock market. So they're all about the numbers, they're all about the profitability. Now, for many years, if you did any reading on it, most builders were getting be 22, 24% profit on their products. So they have some room to work with. So if your used market does not reduce its pricing, then new construction is going to start prevail. They're going to start taking over more of the market because they got these concessions and upgrades and options to get people in and also reduce interest rates. So we have to have some awareness of that when we're working with our client as to whether we want to counter an existing offer on a piece of property that we have. Time on the market is extending in price ranges, and that's generally the higher price range, because if you look at the 400,000 up market, you will see that we're seeing an increase pretty much across the board. The 300 and down, the 300 especially, we're still seeing some good movement in there, but there's just no inventory in the 200 market. So we are starting to see some price range adjustments. And so countering is probably going to be more prevalent in those areas. Buyers offering less than purchase price. These offers are starting to get accepted. And of course, the seller, is starting to move just a little bit, but not much, in that direction to try to get that deal put together. So we are seeing more of that. If you start looking if you do look at market updates on a 24-hour basis, you will see where the properties are not necessarily making price. You are seeing some reductions, some of them are, and there are isolated situations where properties are actually selling over. Most of those are tied with seller concessions. Higher end homes are selling for less than the list price depending on location. So you have to have some awareness of your location. So the higher end product is not in those desirable locations, then it's going to see some adjustments taking place. And we're seeing some big adjustments in the higher end properties. I've seen as 100,000, 150,000 price reductions consistently going on with those properties because that inventory in those areas are increasing. Higher end product from 400 up is, if you look in your data sheets, you will see where that property is starting to see more inventory on a monthly basis. Location and condition of the properties. Properties are selling when the repairs are completed. And the customers went in and did several things. One of the things is that you have to show off the condition of your property. So that means you have to have good pictures. You have to do a good comment section. The comment section, you got to be extremely careful with AI. AI, if you really look at 10 listings in the MLS, and you probably 70% of those people are using AI, and it's the same verbiage across the board. There's nothing wrong with AI. I don't have a problem with it at all. I just think you need to go in and kind of mix it up a little bit, change it around a little bit, knock out a few of those adjectives and stuff that does not make sense to that particular piece of property. AI is generic in nature. It's just like anything else. Anytime you have anything that's generic nature, it does not understand what's inside the house and the condition of the property. That's generally what's creating the problem. We're having to working with agents, and they're explaining to me, one of the problems they have is the property when they get out there is not what they envisioned it to be. Well, that's when you see that, you're going to see that. The bottom line on it is we do marketing. Our job is to get people into the property, and then once we get people in the property, then we have to sell them the property. Then we have to go to work. So, it's that pictures, comments, all of that is just really about getting the customer in the property. But once you get them into property, the repairs need to be taken care of. The property needs to be in reasonable condition. And just remember, and I'm always telling you, don't do 50 pictures. Get 20 or 30 great pictures of the property, depending on the type of property. But people lose interest at the end of 20. So I wouldn't recommend going any further than that with it. But if you feel you need to, and you need to justify the expense of having the photographer take the pictures, that, strictly up to you. The aerial photos are starting to be, the drone photos are becoming more popular as more marketing has to come into place to get these properties moved. Buyers need seller concessions due to the interest rates. I'll be frank with you, you're going to have to start dealing with seller concessions. Somebody said, well, we didn't have to do seller concessions. No, we didn't. We didn't have to do them in the last 2 or 3 years. We didn't. When interest rates are 3%, you don't have to do seller concessions. But when interest rates and prior to the lowering of the interest rates in the fives, we were actually paying up in a lot of cases 3%. Of course, the value of the properties have increased substantially, so seller concessions should be doable depending on the price point, anywhere from 1 to 3%. So always think about it. These are all things that you need to have awareness of and understanding before you ever consider doing presenting an offer or even countering the offer. Homes are experiencing fall throughs. It's all over the news. They've seen some of the biggest numbers nationally. We're experiencing it as a company. So what we have to be careful of that area is called the pendings, the sale pendings. When we're putting valuation on property, we need to understand that some of these properties are not going to close escrow. You need to base your data strictly on closed escrows. If you're starting to use pendings, then it's probably you're going to go down the wrong path in most cases. Somebody said, well, we used to do that all the time when the interest rates were 3%, values were going up. Yeah, that was a different scenario. But the scenario now is fall throughs and backouts and value, and you're using a comp that does not close. It's going to be very problematic, because once you instilled in the client's mind what the valuation is, it's hard to move them. And unfortunately, in today's market, we're having to deal with a lot of price reductions. And some of our agents in the industry does not have the skill level to do that effectively. Buyer commissions. Buyer's agents requesting more than what the seller is willing to pay. Okay, the buyer's commission, this has been a kind of a wild one in the last few months. I understand why buyer's agents want 3% interest. I mean, they want 3% commission of the sales price. I would want the same thing, but the reality of the industry that we're currently starting to move towards, the buyer's commissions are part of the counteroffer format, so they can be problematic. That's got to be resolved right away with the seller. When you're working with the seller, when you're working with counteroffers, you've got to get that figured out. I'm not a big player in an $800,000 house and somebody wanting 3% commissions. They might kill the deal, and so you got to be careful with it. There's nothing wrong with requesting it, but just remember you could trigger a counteroffer when in fact the offer might have been accepted if the valuation of the commissions was a little bit less. And I don't promote less. The company is a big wants you guys to make money, wants you to be profitable, but you're going to have to consider it when you're starting to put your offers together and starting to do counter offers, because it's a bigger problem than I ever thought it would be, and especially with working with agents, we're really having to discuss some of these things because some of these commissions are even coming in at 4 or 5%, which is just totally ridiculous. And I hope us as a company is not doing that, especially if it's a property valuation that's of good value. And you're going to see a little bit more of that as the market continues to adjust. The buyer's agent's going to demand more, and we'll work with you on how to deal with that. Be prepared to discuss offers in terms of the offers. Okay, we got to be prepared for this. And you got to be careful with what we're in these kind of markets. The best offer may be your best offer. Counter may not be accepted, client goes away. So if you have a property listed for 400,000, let's just use that as an example. And you go out and you do all your homework, you do your comps and everything, because the buyer's agent may have done it, or the client may have done it for the buyer, and it comes in at 395,000, would you accept it? That's what you have to start understanding. And of course, it's not you accepted it, it's what your client will accept. But you have to have the mentality that you're not making the decision for the client. So a $395,000 offer may be the only offer you get, and it may be the best offer. And when you go out to sit down with a client, you're going to have to always be in a positive mode. Even if the offer on a $400,000 property come in at 360,000, it may not be acceptable to the seller, but it may be, because we have to understand what we're dealing with. Motivations. What is the motivation of the seller? What is the motivation of the buyer? We have to understand all those parameters. So always consider your best offer. If that offer feels like it might be the best offer, then what you need to do is do your homework and bring that offer forward to see if the seller has a willingness to accept it. Because we're dealing with markets now where sellers don't want to come off price, and then they get an offer on the property and then they turn it down, and then they don't get any other offers, or even if they get 2 or 3 offers and they still don't accept an offer, that would be a clear indication that there's probably a valuation issue with this property or a seller motivation. You're going to have to put thought into it. You're going to have to work on this. Do your homework before you go out to discuss anything with the client. Make sure you're comfortable with being able to discuss the offer and what may be best for the client, with giving them options. Don't ever make decisions for your client, but always have options. Offer price and terms. Determine net price and understand motivation of the seller. Going out on a piece of property and somebody says, how do you get net price? Just get a preliminary cost breakdown from the title company, or use their programs that they have. But my recommendation is always to you is take the offer, send it over to call the title company, have them send you out a preliminary because it's more formal coming from the title company. And it also, if there is a mistake made, it's not going to go to your pocketbook. It's going to go to the title company as long as all the information provided is correct. The terms are always going to be a huge issue when you get into these type of markets. The net sales price, why are you always using net sales price? The net sales price will keep you historically out of trouble when you're getting into these kind of markets. Where you're in a market where somebody's doubling their money from what they purchased it for, it may not be a huge issue, but some of these houses have been purchased in the last 3 or 4 years, may not have enough equity in them. And so you got to understand that. So if the house was purchased 3 years ago and you're currently selling it, you need to know what the net number is, because if the net number doesn't work, that is going to determine what you're going to counter offer if you need to counter, or you have to determine that you're going to do this another way, and it could possibly be with a short sale. Offer price and terms is never going to change, because once those are set in place, then it's going to determine where you're going to go with your offer. Presenting offers. Presenting an offer, the smartest thing for you ever to do is get a highlighter. Take a highlighter and highlight and discuss key points of the offer. It will historically keep you out of trouble, because when you get into these market shifts like this, commissions start eroding away rather rapidly because of issues within it. And especially when you got the commissions in the middle of these offers now, and we're just now starting to see some of these issues. So I would highlight the key points. And then if you see errors in there, then you need to correct it in the counteroffer. An example that I've seen a little bit of, and I've seen more than once, they don't put the loan amount in. So it turns into a cash offer. And there's a loan that would be involved because guess what? They provided a pre-qualification letter. Those would have to be addressed. They would have to show up in the counteroffer. So you always go through, highlight everything. And when you highlight everything that is important, somebody said, well, what would be important? Well, at the end of this program, we're going to go over some of the key areas that I'm seeing the most of, but it would be price. It would be loan amount. It would be contingencies, any contingencies that have timelines tied to them. Those are all very important. So if there's there's an error in there, down payment, anything that's in those key points there, you're going to have to trigger those in a counteroffer. Don't leave anything that's not, it's a contract, so keep it tight. The current market conditions. Support information to support recommendations. Agents cannot be going out there and providing information if they can't support it. It becomes a liability, and you really don't want to get yourself in that position. So how do you get current market conditions? Well, you don't go to the internet and see what realtor.com or somebody else come up with and use that for your support. You can look at it, it can give you an indicator, but that's not your support information. Your current market conditions are tied within your local MLS, whether you're in Fresno, Bakersfield, Visalia, or any of the outlying communities. The data is there. That's what you use. So when you sit down with a client, you have that data with you, because that's going to lead you to support any recommendations that you might have. Because the customer might ask you, well, what do you think? The market is indicating this. This is the support information to support that. And that's what you have to start being using. Customers are, a little weary of anybody orally communicating with them unless they have support information, especially in sales. Most people have been around sales environments their entire lives, and some of the information is skewed to support something. So if you have current market conditions, it can't be argued with. It is facts. And so that's the importance of that. So always use it. Use a current CMA and discuss the inventory. And when I say the inventory, the competing inventory, competing properties within the geographical area of what you're working. So if you have a property in a specific location and within a half a mile, you can find 3 closings, and you can find 3 closings, believe it or not, that goes back 6 months, it's probably going to be close to what the current market is because times have changed. 3 years ago, it was a different story. Market changed every week, to be honest with you, and it went up in value. But the market is currently starting to scale back, especially in the last 90 days. We're seeing a lot of discussion on this as to what the market is doing and what it's not. Put that out of the back of your mind. Stay with your CMA, stay with your local MLS service, and you use that data. The customers, yes, they're hearing all of that. Actually, to be honest with you, the market we're starting to see news media come out saying inventory is increasing, values starting to go down, fall throughs. Is it really going to hurt us? Probably not. When we go out and talk to the seller, it's in the news every day. So, I mean, it is what it is. Compatible properties in the area to support a counteroffer. Those properties need to be compatible. And the biggest one that you got to be extremely careful with is a 2-story against a single story. Using 2-story data is going to be problematic because customers like looking at square footage. Of course, they like looking at the net. But the thing of it is try to stay with a single story. If you're dealing with a 2-story, try to stay with a 2-story. And keep your data clean as possible. Square footage, try to get yourself within about, the ideal situation, it'd be 200 square feet either direction, which is a total of 400 square feet differential one way or the other. But the thing of it is sometimes you can't get that. And as you probably all know, as you're looking at the MLS, a low square footage house, 1,100 square foot house, it's getting on a price per square footage basis much better than a house that's got 2,400 square feet. That's just normal. So don't think it's when you're working with that. It's the reason why you want to try to keep those 2 variables as close as you can. Why is all of this important when you're dealing with this? It's because it dictates the valuation. It helps determine what a property is selling for. We don't know what the customer's thinking. Well, John Blow's house down the street sold for such and such a valuation. Well, you're going to have to be able to counter that. And the only way you can counter that when your discussion with your client is know the data, know what's going on. Agents that are seasoned or been in the business and have done a lot of transactions in this current market understand these principles. Buyer's pre-qualifying letter to be current. You got to do it. It's got to be updated time and offer. Take a look at the top of it. Take a quick look. Take a look at the terms. Take a look at what they're qualified for. Get as much information as you can because that becomes part of your offer and in a sense, because it determines the ability of the purchase to be able to purchase a property. Contingency sales involving buyer's property. Discuss process with seller. This one is a problem. I'm currently working with agents on this, and here's the problem. The buyers put a contingency in there that their property has to sell, but the value of their house is not going to work. It's too high. So when you get one of those, you have to really work with the other agent. My recommendation to you is go through that property, because in most cases that property has not been listed. Unless you want to live with a client for an extended period of time, it's going to get a little testy in most cases. So when they bring one of those offers in, you need to understand what you're dealing with. And trying to do a quick CMA on that property may not be a good indicator unless there's pictures of that property. If there's no pictures of that property, I would recommend that you go out and go through the property, because you cannot help your customer make an informed decision if they haven't, if they have no value of it. And they have a right to go out and look at it too. I mean, you can make that as a condition. So when you discuss this, you have to go over all the terms. You have to do the explanations. So some contingency sales, when you look at the contingency form, make sure you understand it. There's about 4 or 5 key issues in there that you have to have awareness of. Number one is you want to know when the disclosures are going to start. When is the escrow going to be open? Those are important timelines. Or are you going to use your current offer? So look at that if you're dealing with that and it's come in from another agent. Unfortunately, a lot of these agents don't have a good understanding of the contingency sale process, because it really wasn't in play for many, for you for a long time. And when it was in play, everything sold, so it was never become an issue when it comes to closing. Personal property. These refrigerators are a big problem, so you have to be extremely careful with that. We put an X in there that says the refrigerator's got to be included, and then the refrigerator disappears, and then you as an agent, you got to work at it to get it brought back. And so it just gets to be a problem. So my recommendation to you is try to keep it as clean as possible and don't ask for anything that's personal. When you do, you're opening up a door for a potential problem for you, unless you're constantly reminding the customer and they forget. They're moving out of the property, and before you know it, things have moved with it. And so make sure that you've touched bases on everything involving the personal property. All of these are tied to when you're doing counteroffers. If something is not right, then we got to get it corrected. Buyer's commission. Discuss with seller and counter if needed. Don't let the buyer's commission create such a problem that you cannot work with your seller. You're going to have to work with your seller. My recommendation is, of course, we have to deal with the buyer's commission. The buyers are not going to be paying commissions. They haven't demonstrated that they will. And the lawsuit was really about attorneys collecting revenue, and that's basically what it was. But when you see a commission, when it comes in, it's on the contract itself. Guess what? It becomes part of a counteroffer. It's not about calling up the agent you could, but the buyer's agent, if he asks for 3% commission, he must want 3% commission. And that's, in most cases, that's what it is. You work with the seller. find out what the seller is willing to pay. And when I said, remember I told you on the first page on the net sheet, the net sheet is what's dictating what's happening. The seller is starting to tell you, I've got to net a certain dollar amount. The buyer's commission may come into play. So just understand it. When you're working with the seller, understand the buyer's commissions may come into play. But don't choose to ignore it. And as we always do, we want everybody to be paid. We want everybody to, receive as much compensation as they can, but we don't want to kill the deal either. We don't want to lose it over somebody asking for 4 or 5% commission. It's probably going to require a counter. Solar systems, and solar systems is going to be an interesting scenario come January 1 of next year, because federal government has taken away the federal solar credits, and so I don't know where this is all going to go, but we're going to have to take a look at it then. The solar system, this has got to be resolved at the counter offer or offer stage. And of course, we're working on counter offer here originally, and it could be where we're recountering, and it has to be resolved. It has to be determined. This is not something we solve during escrow. This is something we solve if we're a listing agent. We get a copy of the contract, we take a look at it. If we don't understand it, you can forward it to me for review. But it's a major part of your contract. And so as the market starts adjusting downward, these things are going to become a bigger issue. People are not going to want to pay them off in some cases because their profitability is not there. Understand what you're dealing with, a lease and a power agreement. They're all doable. We can manage them all, but we have to understand what we're doing. We have to understand if we're going to pay it off. We're going to have to understand if we're going to see if the lease can be taken over. We're going to have to understand if it's got a power agreement. Somebody wants it paid off in 2 years. Well, power agreement is in place for 5. They don't normally allow it because of tax credits. So understand it. It's a big part of your contract. It's not something that you can look over. Keep counteroffers alive. If I don't tell you anything else in this meeting today, you keep it alive. You're never the person to let it die. I'm going to be honest with you. You should have the ability to get a counteroffer. If you cannot get a counteroffer, you either don't have a buyer or you don't have a seller. If you just remember that, you will keep the offer alive, because there is a problem if people are not willing to counteroffer to try to find some neutral ground to put a deal together. Avoid as is, market has changed, and seller needs to do any necessary repair work. Now, health and safety has got to be done. I would recommend the other repair work, because when you get in a changing market, the properties that are selling are the properties that are in good condition. The properties have had the necessary repairs completed, and they will get their property sold. And the property that is in not good repair is going to not sell, or it's going to get extremely low offers. So just have some awareness. Bob, could you change the page, please? And while we're waiting for Bob, the highest and best, thank you, Bob. The highest and best is not a counteroffer. I want you to be extremely careful with this, because somebody's historically fishing for higher valuation. if this property is underpriced or it's in extremely good condition and the seller has got 7 offers, the seller needs to take the best offer and move on. When they start that fishing program, sometimes it's historically doesn't work. It worked when interest rates were 3%. But in today's market, that is not a counteroffer. That is a wish list. And so if you as an agent are doing that, you need to stop it because you have to work with your client. You work with your client and you go with the best offer and you do counters and you can do multiple counter offers. So you could counter all of them. But the thing of it is it doesn't work well. It's when you do highest and best, it creates a problem for the buyer's agent. It creates a problem for everybody, and it's not really a counteroffer. It's just it's throwing a line out there and seeing if somebody will buy, take it. Do not accept oral counteroffers. It's going to get you in trouble every time. Do not negotiate. You and another agent start negotiating what needs to happen. You're not the buyer, you're not the seller. What you need to do is that you need to focus on your client and not anything that's orally going on, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. And if you turn and contacted your client on an oral counteroffer and then in fact something come in writing, it probably will come in less and it's going to be a problem. So the contract always needs to be in writing and it always needs to it's just the way it needs to be. Buyers may not accept the counteroffer. Well, yes, that is true. That happens. Buyers counteroffer, keep the offer alive with a recounter. Generally, it's overpriced in terms. So just recounter it back. Buyer's ability to purchase. Check with the lender to see if the buyer can purchase at a higher price. We see counters coming back and higher price. My lands, they couldn't buy the house if they had to. You got to check with the lender. We got to make sure we got it. It's working. Buyers wanting personal property, try to get that out. It's an easy explanation. We're only selling real property here. We're not selling private property. If you want to work with a client, after close of escrow, feel free to involving the personal property. But don't start putting that in the contract. You're going to start having some issues. Buyer and property prior to close of escrow, we don't recommend that, and that's going to be a problem. We don't want them in it after. We want the property vacant at close of escrow. Contingency on buyers selling their home. It's got to be, we talked about this a little earlier. It's got to be priced correctly. And I'll be honest with you, it probably needs to be priced a little bit under what the CMA is showing, because that property's got to be sold, and then it's got to get over on your side and get your deal going, and you want to make sure that you got a strong situation there. Cash buyers, we got cash buyers that are not cash buyers. So verify the source of funds and provide a copy. If you're doing a counter, it needs to be there. The cash buyer, if you're the selling agent, and you get it verified. If you haven't received it at the counteroffer stage, then my suggestion to you, and somebody said, well, the contract says you can provide it within so many days. That's fine, but I'm not going to counter a cash buyer when I don't have any verification of funds. So I have the agent send it over to you so that you have it prior to doing a counter. Seller, multiple counteroffers. Understand the reason for multiple counters. As you know from prior training, you know that you don't have to counter them the same way. You can counter them with different terms and conditions. But understand the process. and understand how you're doing it. Most of the time, I would not recommend a multiple counteroffer unless the seller is insisting on it. Or the seller says, I want more, I want to see which one will pay more. Well, then you're going to be using a multiple counteroffer. It's not highest and best. Use the multiple counteroffer and find out what your client is willing to do. All of these things that we're talking about here today is telling us what type of client we have, whether it's a buyer or whether it's a seller. And some people say, well, I just don't want to counteroffer anything because the offer is too low. No, I want to find out what my seller is willing to do. So if I'm working with the seller, I'm going to say, hey, John, we need to counter it. He says it's too low. I understand that, but we need to counter back what you're willing to accept and see if John has got a little flexibility in it. He said, oh, well, I'll take $10,000 less. Okay, all right, let's counter it back. Other side doesn't accept it. What did we find out? What did we learn? Well, he's got some flexibility. He's negotiable. Maybe we need to get a price reduction on this property. Maybe that's what we need to do. Avoid discussing counteroffers over the phone. I know it's difficult. Clients want to know it. Have them come to the office or do it over Zoom or whatever method, if you want to go out to the property or whatever it might be. I mean, it's hard to work with a client when you can't get facial expressions, can't get emotions. You got to understand all of that when you're working with the client. So it becomes very important. So let's talk about the counteroffer form. The counteroffer form under the other terms section, do not repeat contract language already agreed between the buyer and seller in an existing contract. It's an ongoing problem. You got to be careful with this. And when I'm working with agents, I see this and I say, look, you can't be doing that. You're creating a conflict. You're changing verbiage. If you change the verbiage in any way, it creates a conflict. So don't change anything that has already been agreed between the buyer and the seller. Just maybe it's you got to be careful with this because sometimes agents get excited and they start writing. And then before you know it, we've got a problem because the contract is generally not completed correctly. And attorneys have completed all these forms, so we don't need to be getting into the legal side of the house. When writing a counteroffer, you need to be very specific. And I'm doing some examples here, and we're going to be talking about it. Bob, can you move this just a little bit for me? And I appreciate it. Now, the sales price, an example, sales price to be 400,000. Don't put in there sales price to be 400,000 and create a new line for everything. So keep it specific. Because when you start throwing out a big old long line, it's got a bunch of different things in it, it's going to become problematic. So the sales price, when you counter it, you be specific about it. Escrow is to be 30 days. Please don't get in the battle of the escrow company who you want to work with. If this deal, the only thing wrong with this deal is instead of a 45-day escrow and a 30-day escrow, whatever was written in the original, my recommendation, just go along with it. Don't complicate it. I mean, sometimes this is all agent driven and I don't want a deal getting killed over some small thing like that. Most clients on either side, agents on either side, the clients historically don't have a problem unless they've done business with somebody specifically for a period of time. If that is the case, then stipulate in your listing agreement that the escrow is to be with, it's been pre-opened with a certain escrow officer at a certain title company. In Northern California, every escrow is opened that way. Everyone. Anytime you open up an MLS, everyone is there. So there's no rule against it. Somebody tried to tell me there was a rule against it because they work for a title company. I said, there's no rule against it. Whatever the seller determines where the escrow is to be, they can put it in there. They can put it in a form. Can it be changed? Yes. But that would be during the counteroffer stage. But most of the time, the escrow issues are agent issues. And so I don't want a deal getting blown up over that. And the bottom line on it is, guys, you can counter it. You can counter it back if either party is insisting on it going one way or the other. Buyer's commission. My suggestion, seller agrees to pay buyer's commission $10,000. I don't use, it's a big number, isn't it? If you use 3%, is that a big number? It doesn't appear to be on a $400,000 house or a $700,000 house. If the seller is agreeing to pay it, put the dollar amount out there so everybody understands it. Because I ran into a situation here, well, I didn't realize it was that much when it was countered. Put the dollar amount. Now I realize that most agents will put 2.5%, 2%. But the bigger the number, the more everybody has awareness. And if I'm a buyer's agent and I've had to reduce his commissions from 15,000 down to 10,000, 10,000 is still a lot of money. But you have to remember, I'm not making the decision on the commission, the seller is. And I'm having to deal with a net sheet involving the seller. So bottom line on it is it's his call. Seller's concession is to credit 3% of the sales price towards the buyer's closing costs. You could actually put the dollar amount in there, but it's customary nowadays. Customary, we see a lot of, we're starting to see 3%, 2%, 1%. Me personally, I would always recommend that you use a dollar amount, 10,000, 5,000. Everybody knows what it is. And so it doesn't create a big issue. Usually it creates an issue when the sales price has been changed. So if you put an actual dollar amount in there, sometimes that works. But you got to be careful with it when you're countering price. Solar, seller to pay off solar at close of escrow. Stipulate it. You notice I'm keeping it simple. Seller to pay off the solar system at close of escrow. The seller is to assume to lease the solar system or whatever it might be. But don't go into a 2-liner or 3-liner and payment's not going to change and all this kind of stuff. The document provided for them and to be subject to their approval. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's in your contract. The down payment dollar amount is to be 5,000. Now, I will tell you currently what we're starting to see more of is 1% of the sales price. We went for years for $1,000. We're still seeing a little of that, but I'll be honest with you, those numbers are increasing 3, 4, 5,000. They keep going up. I had an agent call me and talk to me about it and said, "Oh, well, they have a $10,000 deposit, worry about losing it, and they're thinking about backing out." And I said, "Well, they back out on that $500,000 deal, it could become an issue if it's more than, if it's less than 3% of the sales value." So it can keep motivation for people to stay in the property because the bigger the deposit increases the motivation to stay with it. But the company doesn't take a big position on it. it's whatever whatever the client wants you as a deposit. If they ask for your recommendation, the bigger the deposit, the better. And, makes the deal psychologically stronger, not necessarily any stronger. Possession. Property is to be vacant at close. Not even 24 hours after close. You can't be doing that. It's going to be a problem for you as an agent. Possession needs to be closed and it needs to be vacant so you can do the walkthrough. Now, somebody said, well, what about 30 days later? Can I do the walkthrough? Yeah, verification and condition of the property. Yeah, you can do it 30 days later, but that's when the battles start. My recommendation to you is people's expectations are as good as the close of escrow date. So if they walk through the property and say, hey, I'm okay, sign off on the form and everybody goes. They don't want to sign the form, there's a waiver on that form. But let's get these properties vacant and closed. There's no reason why we should not have that case going on. The only time we run into that is generally a contingency sale. And so let's get those taken care of. Contingencies. All contingencies be removed in 10 days after acceptance of offer. Well, I would not recommend it's not something I would do in this current market. I know we lived with it. The reason why I'm talking about it today and the reason why I put the number in there is I don't recommend it. You should stay with your standard forms, the 17 days, and just remember all your contingencies need to be removed at the end of 17 days. And you need to get that taken care of because that's part of the contract, and then that also explains your motivation. Now, I hope today you have a better understanding of what you need to do when you're dealing with counteroffers. When you're dealing with counteroffers, it's a thought process. All of these things I went through today is things that you should have thought about prior to taking your offer out to the client. If you feel that you're possibly going to get a counteroffer, understand, okay, if I get a counteroffer, this is how I need to verb it. This is what I need to do. Have I done my homework? Do I have a good understanding of the client? Because that is going to be the key to your success. Agents that are very successful in this market understand the process. And counteroffer is a process. And it's not just picking up a form and writing something down and going. Every time you put something on a counteroffer, that's telling you something about your client. And you're telling you about the motivation of your client, whether you have a client or whether you don't have a client. So it's very important that the counteroffer stage is handled correctly. You have great support in this company. Feel free to call me at any time. Mike Allen's available. You got great managers in all your offices. So my recommendation to you, if you need a little bit more support or you need to run something by one of us, feel free to do it. That's what we're here for. Is there any questions by any chance? Are we good? All right. Everybody have a great day. And thanks for coming on today. And as always, if you need any help, let us know. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.